The chamber of the Galactic Council was designed to dwarf its occupants. Vaulted light arched overhead, refracted through crystal lattices that bent color into authority. Delegates floated, perched, coiled, or stood upon platforms tailored to their species. At the center, beneath the convergence of every gaze, the human delegation remained still. Commander Elias Rourke clasped his hands behind his back. High Arbiter Zelthran let the silence mature. He had learned long ago that quiet unsettled mammals. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the smooth certainty of law. The vote is concluded. Holographic glyphs flared above the chamber, 12 sigils, one after another, locking into place. A finding has been reached under Article 17 of the Unified Stability Charter, Zelthran continued. The Terran polity is hereby designated a destabilizing military actor. A ripple passed through the chamber. Not surprise, anticipation. All offensive and defensive systems exceeding baseline planetary security thresholds will be dismantled or deactivated within one standard cycle. Orbital platforms. Autonomous combat intelligences. Fleet assets beyond home system patrol classification. Rourke didn't move. This is not a punishment, Zelthran said, magnanimous. It is protection. For the galaxy. And for humanity itself. Rourke inclined his head. Understood. The simplicity of the response drew murmurs. Zelthran's upper limbs flexed, irritation flickering through his bioluminescent markings. You raise no objection? No, Arbiter. You do not dispute the finding? We've read the draft, Rourke replied. Extensively. A pause. Then compliance is expected. It will be delivered. Rourke hesitated, just long enough to make the chamber lean forward. May we receive the final, ratified text, he asked. For archival accuracy. Zelthran allowed himself a thin smile. Of course. History should be precise. The gavel struck. Light dimmed. The decision echoed outward, faster than ships could carry it. Earth complied. News feeds broadcast the dismantling in careful frames, orbital defense rings lowered from geosynchronous arcs, their housings peeled open like shedding skins. Shipyards fell silent. Decommissioned hulls were cut apart, metal fed back into civilian fabrication lines. Artificial intelligences, names whispered like legends, were boxed into cold storage, their cores dark. Rourke watched from the observation deck above Luna's shipyard. Sparks drifted like dying stars. They think this makes us safe, said Director Amorichin, her reflection ghosted in the glass. They think it makes them safe, Rourke replied. Chin folded her arms. The Council says baseline patrol craft are sufficient. For pirates? Rourke shook his head. For opportunists? No. You sound certain. I am. The first test came sooner than expected. A trade convoy from Epsilon Indy never reached its jump point. The distress call arrived fragmented, screams, static, the stutter of failing shields that no longer existed. By the time a patrol cutter arrived, the wreckage was already cooling. No survivors. The attackers left no signatures. They didn't need to. Within hours, the feeds filled with speculation. Commentators demanded explanations. Families demanded answers. The Council issued condolences and a reminder, interstellar trade beyond core systems carried inherent risk. Rourke stood before the Security Assembly, his voice level. We are vulnerable, a senator said. Say it. We are exposed, Rourke agreed. By law. And what are you doing about it? Exactly what we're allowed. That night, another colony went silent. A fringe habitat, light years from Sol, its defense grid dismantled 3 weeks prior. No broadcast. No warning. The room where Rourke received the report was dark except for the data stream scrolling across the table. Chin broke the silence. They're probing. Yes. How long before it escalates? It already has. Then why aren't we responding? Rourke met her eyes. Because they're watching for that. At Aurelian Station, High Arbiter Zelthran reviewed the incident summaries with mild satisfaction. Piracy is regrettable, said one delegate. Predictable, said another. Zelthran inclined his head. Humanity must learn moderation. Strength invites challenge. Restraint invites peace. Will they hold? A younger arbiter asked. They dismantled faster than required, Zelthran replied. They are frightened. He dismissed the session early. Earth burned quietly. Not in firestorms or fleet engagements, but in losses that never made history. A freighter here. A relay station there. Each incident logged, protested, archived. Each response met with procedure. Rourke walked through the memorial hall beneath Geneva, names already etching themselves into stone. They'll keep coming, Chen said softly. Yes. And still nothing? Rourke stopped before an empty wall. Not nothing. Preparation. For what? For the moment they realize what they've actually taken from us. Another convoy was scheduled to depart within the hour. Civilian. Unarmed. Legal. Rourke watched it lift from the pad, engines flaring against the night. Behind him, unseen and unheard, systems across Earth adjusted, rerouting, reallocating, complying with every letter of the law. The galaxy believed it had disarmed a species. It hadn't noticed what humanity had been holding together. The first directive went out without ceremony. It did not involve fleets, weapons, or declarations. It was a quiet authorization packet stamped Civilian Infrastructure Initiative, routed through a dozen departments that had not spoken to each other in years. No emergency powers were invoked. No secrecy clauses activated. Commander Elias Rourke stood at the head of the strategy chamber as the room filled, economists, engineers, logisticians, network architects. People who never wore uniforms. We are following the law, Rourke said. Exactly. A murmur followed. Chen leaned back in her chair. And when that gets people killed? Rourke met her gaze. It already has. This keeps more from dying later. A projection unfolded above the table, a web of trade routes, energy transfers, data corridors. Human-built, human-maintained, human-optimized. Under Udala, Rourke continued, military assets are restricted. Civilian services are not. An engineer raised a hand. You're saying we stop protecting the galaxy? No, Rourke said. We stop compensating for it. Human trade vessels began offering open logistics contracts across the Perseus Fringe. No tariffs. No exclusivity. Repairs at cost. Navigation assistance free of charge. Galactic commerce surged. Independent systems rerouted traffic through human hubs. Insurance rates dropped. Travel time shortened. Even Council fleets adopted Terran navigation protocols, legal, efficient, and temptingly reliable. Aurelian Station's analysts celebrated the numbers. Stability indices are up, reported an aide. Zelthran studied the chart. Of course they are. Humans thrive under guidance. The first failure registered as an anomaly. A bulk carrier exiting hyperspace 30 seconds late. No damage. No casualties. Logged as variance. Then a refinery on the Kelt axis miscalculated its intake schedule. Production slowed. Workers were sent home early. Minor issues. Background noise. Rourke watched the reports accumulate without comment. Chen broke the silence. They're depending on us. Yes. And if we pull back? We don't pull back, Rourke said. We maintain service. We simply stop anticipating mistakes. Human engineers accepted positions everywhere. Not as overseers. As consultants. Systems optimizers. Infrastructure auditors. They embedded into power grids, shipping consortiums, orbital traffic control centers. They followed local regulations, local command structures. They documented everything. A council member's species requested a human data relay upgrade. It complied with every standard. The upgrade went live. 3 weeks later, a firmware update failed to propagate beyond a regional node. The fallback system engaged, older, slower, less resilient. Still legal. On the fringe, a pirate flotilla attempted another raid. Their jump coordinates were precise. Their timing flawless. Their fuel reserves were not. 2 ships stalled between stars. The rest scattered. Survivors later swore their manifests had been correct. They were. Zelthran convened an inquiry. Explain the disruptions, he demanded. A logistics arbiter adjusted his display. Human systems remain within operational parameters. No violations detected. Then why are our fleets reporting shortages? Routing inefficiencies, another said. Human networks previously compensated for suboptimal planning. Zelthran's markings pulsed. They are sabotaging us. No evidence supports that conclusion, the arbiter replied carefully. They are complying. At Earth's central exchange, Rourke reviewed the dependency curves. They can't disengage quickly, Chen said. Too much is tied together. That's their choice, Rourke replied. We offered efficiency. They accepted. A junior analyst hesitated. Sir, this is dangerous. If they realize. They won't, Rourke said. Not yet. They're trained to look for weapons. The analyst swallowed. And when they do? Rourke's expression didn't change. Then we'll show them the paperwork. The cascading effects took shape. A council patrol group misjudged resupply windows. A carrier arrived to find its depot empty, another fleet had arrived first, guided by a Terran scheduling algorithm that prioritized proximity over rank. No rule was broken. On Aurelian Station, environmental controls fluctuated. Temperature variance remained within tolerances, but comfort complaints spiked. Maintenance crews blamed outdated predictive models. Those models had been maintained by humans. Zelthran stood before the chamber, anger finally breaking through restraint. Summon Commander Rourke. The transmission linked without delay. Rourke appeared, seated, hands folded. High Arbiter. Your species is degrading galactic infrastructure. We are operating all systems under Council oversight, Rourke replied. Would you like the compliance logs? Zelthran hesitated. Your presence is pervasive. You invited our participation, Rourke said. We accepted. Silence stretched. Restore previous performance levels, Zelthran ordered. Rourke inclined his head. That would require predictive intervention beyond our contracted scope. You did it before. Yes, Rourke said. When we were responsible for outcomes. We are no longer. The link terminated. A council fleet attempting a rapid redeployment ran out of fuel mid-jump. Emergency protocols saved the ships. The embarrassment echoed across the networks. Rourke watched the alert appear, then disappear. Still no violations, Chen said. No, Rourke agreed. Outside Earth's orbit, traffic flowed, slower, less certain, more fragile. The galaxy had not lost a weapon. It had lost a caretaker. And it was only beginning to feel the absence. The collapse did not announce itself with fire. It arrived as delays, discrepancies, unanswered queries. The galaxy slowed, then stumbled. Cargo queues stretched across systems. Agricultural shipments missed rotation windows. Medical synthfabs waited on components drifting somewhere between lawful checkpoints. Each failure was survivable. Together, they formed a pattern no one wanted to name. High Arbiter Zelthran stared at the live feeds flooding his chamber. Voices overlapped. Data scrolled too fast. This is impossible, he said. Stability metrics were improving. They were dependent, an aide replied. On human coordination. Zelthran turned sharply. Then compelled them to resume full support. They are, the aide said. Within the treaties. The words landed like a fracture. Riots erupted on 3 trade worlds within a week. Not over ideology, but scarcity. Energy rationing followed. Councils blamed logistics guilds. Guilds blamed outdated models. Investigations found no sabotage. Only absence. On Earth, the lights never flickered. Rourke stood before the Planetary Council, hands resting on the table. The room was silent, waiting. "They're unraveling," Chen said. "Yes. And when they fall far enough?" "They'll ask," Rourke replied. "Not demand." A priority transmission arrived before the meeting adjourned. Zelthran appeared, his bioluminescence dulled, posture rigid. "Commander Rourke. This situation is unsustainable." "I agree," Rourke said. "Restore prior operational standards." Rourke exhaled slowly. "High Arbiter, we never agreed to guarantee outcomes. Only compliance. You engineered this." "No," Rourke said. "We optimized it. You removed the safeguards." Zelthran's voice sharpened. "You are strangling the galaxy without firing a shot." Rourke's gaze held steady. "You disarmed the hands that were holding it together." Silence followed, heavy and unignorable. The council convened in emergency session. Supply forecasts projected famine curves. Fleet readiness dipped below defense thresholds. Member states threatened withdrawal. Authority bled through procedural cracks. Zelthran addressed the chamber, the certainty gone. "Human participation is indispensable," he said. "We must reconsider the limitations." Debate was brief. Fear concentrates minds. A revised accord passed within the hour. Rourke read the transmission twice before speaking. "They're offering reinstatement," Chen said. "Defensive autonomy. Fleet reconstruction. AI reactivation." "Yes," Rourke said. "With amendments. Mutual deterrence clauses," Chen added. "Shared oversight. Respect," Rourke said. "Written into law." The reply went out. Aurelian Station waited. The chamber felt smaller when Rourke returned. Less theatrical. More human. Zelthran regarded him from the central dais. "You planned this from the beginning." Rourke shook his head. "We planned for the possibility you wouldn't listen. You let worlds suffer." Rourke's voice remained calm. "We let the consequences of your decision unfold. We did not add to them." The Arbiter's markings dimmed. "Your species is dangerous." "Yes," Rourke agreed. When cornered. This was restraint. The revised treaty hovered between them, clauses glowing as they were accepted. One by one, signatures appeared. Human systems resumed predictive support within minutes. Routes corrected themselves. Energy flows stabilized. Food shipments realigned. The galaxy exhaled, unaware it had been holding its breath. On the fringe, pirates found their windows gone. Opportunistic fleets retreated, suddenly wary of invisible boundaries. Earth's shipyards reopened. Hulls took shape, not in secrecy, but in daylight. Zelthran watched the feeds with something like awe. "You could have destroyed us." Rourke met his gaze. "That would have taught nothing." "What do you want?" the Arbiter asked quietly. Rourke considered the question. "To be left unchained. And to be trusted to choose when not to use force." Zelthran inclined his head, a gesture stripped of arrogance. "We mistook patience for submission." Rourke allowed himself a thin smile. "You own again." Back on Earth, the Memorial Hall gained no new names. Chen stood beside Rourke as the final reports closed. "They'll fear us now." "Fear fades," Rourke said. "Memory lasts." Outside, traffic moved cleanly through orbit, guided by systems that never needed to announce their presence. Humanity's defenses came back online quietly. Not as a threat. As a reminder. The galaxy would remember what happened when humans stopped holding it together. Peace returned the way it always did, unevenly. Trade lanes stabilized within days, but trust took longer to recalibrate. Systems that had relied on human coordination now studied redundancy like scripture. Council members spoke carefully, every word weighed against memory. Earth did not gloat. That unsettled them most. Commander Elias Rourke stood on the balcony above the Terran Assembly Hall, watching delegates arrive from a dozen species. No banners. No spectacle. Just security, protocol, and the quiet acknowledgement that something fundamental had shifted. Chen joined him, carrying a slim datapad. They're nervous. They should be, Rourke said. Nervous minds ask better questions. Inside, the chamber filled. Not with accusation, but curiosity edged with restraint. High Arbiter Zelthran entered last. He looked smaller than before. Not diminished, changed. Authority no longer radiated from certainty, but from survival. The session opened without ceremony. We are here, Zelthran said, to redefine coexistence. A ripple moved through the delegates. Rourke took the floor when invited. No projections. No data walls. Just his voice. You've rebuilt your systems, he said. But not your assumptions. A representative from the Celt Axis bristled. We accepted your terms. What more do you want? Rourke turned slightly toward them. Understanding. Explain. You believed humanity was dangerous because we built weapons, Rourke said. You were wrong. We built responsibility. You asked us to set it down. A murmur spread. Zelthran did not interrupt. When we joined the council, Rourke continued, we didn't bring fleets. We brought logistics, forecasting, disaster response. You called it efficiency. You forgot it was choice. Silence settled, thoughtful now. A delegate from the agricultural bloc spoke. You let our people starve. Rourke's expression tightened, just perceptibly. No. We stopped feeding a system that refused to acknowledge dependence. There is a difference. Zelthran inclined his head. One we failed to see. The negotiations that followed were unlike any before them. Humans did not demand dominance. They proposed integration. Shared infrastructure councils. Rotational oversight. Mutual veto on system-wide sanctions. Defensive transparency balanced with autonomy. Every clause was precise. This limits council authority, an arbiter protested. It limits unilateral error, Chen replied coolly. Zelthran watched the exchange, then spoke. Authority that cannot survive scrutiny is not governance. It is habit. The vote passed, not unanimously, but sufficiently. Weeks later, a human cruiser escorted a council delegation through the Perseus Fringe. Not as a display of force, but as presence. Pirate activity vanished. Rourke stood on the bridge, hands resting lightly on the rail. They're adapting, Chen said, observing the clean sensor sweeps. They always do, Rourke replied. Eventually. A junior officer hesitated before speaking. Sir, will they ever trust us? Rourke considered. Trust isn't given. It's tested. Repeatedly. And if they fail again? Rourke looked out at the stars. Then we remind them. Quieter next time. At Aurelian Station, Zelthran walked alone through the archive galleries. Holograms of past rulings flickered around him, decisions once made with confidence, now shadowed by consequence. He paused before the record of Udala. So certain, he murmured. A human archivist stood nearby, silent. Zelthran turned. Why didn't you warn us more clearly? The archivist met his gaze. We did. You just didn't believe we would ever stop helping. Zelthran absorbed that, then nodded once. On Earth, shipyards produced vessels designed not for intimidation, but response. Defense grids came online with transparency logs accessible to the Council in real time. Nothing hidden. Nothing surrendered. Rourke visited the Memorial Hall again. The wall remained unchanged. Chen stood beside him. No new names. That's the goal, he said. She studied him. Do you ever regret it? Letting them fall apart first? Rourke answered without hesitation. If we had intervened earlier, they would have learned nothing. And we'd be back here again. Outside, children played beneath the hall's open sky, unaware of how close the galaxy had come to breaking. Months later, a new species petitioned for council entry. Young. Ambitious. Armed to excess. Debate ignited immediately. Zelthran requested a human advisory presence. Rourke declined. Chen attended instead. Her words were brief. Don't ask them to disarm. Ask them what they're holding together. The chamber fell quiet. The galaxy moved forward, not safer, but wiser. Humanity remained what it had always been, adaptive, restrained, relentless when pushed too far. They had not won a war. They had corrected an error. And the stars, orderly once more, bore silent witness to a truth now written into law and memory alike. Some species conquer space. Humans make it work.